Okay, it's 2 minutes after, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And just a bit later in the webinar, I'm going to share the recording details. So if you have coworkers, other users that come in late or can't attend the webinar, I'll make sure you have access to the recording. And let me just, sorry, give me 1 second. Zoom is not playing nice here. Okay. All right, well, welcome everyone to today's InfoBurst webinar. Today we'll be looking at the most recent release of InfoBurst, which is InfoBurst version 2022.1, and looking at some of the key features in this version. I appreciate all of you taking the time today to join us. It's always good to see all of you. We've got a really strong community out there in InfoBurst land. And the purpose of these webinars is really to keep you informed, let you know how this InfoBurst product that you're using is evolving, and maybe hopefully show you other ways that you can derive value from InfoBurst. So right off the top, I'll acknowledge it's been a couple years since we've had a webinar. We used to do these fairly regularly, and that really tailed off because we've been quite busy over the last 2 years. As many of you know, we spent the bulk of, boy, it's been a long couple of years, hasn't it? We spent a good chunk of time redeveloping the InfoBurst user interface to get away from the old Flash UI to the new modern HTML UI. And then from there, we jumped right into the new 64-bit version of InfoBurst. So we've been really busy over the last few years, but things are settling in, and we plan to do these webinars very regularly. There'll be one for at least every version release per year, so that's at least 4 webinars. And then we do plan to, between those, have a few topic-specific webinars, right? Just kind of a knowledge transfer, how to use, maybe user stories, things like that. So look for a lot more of these going forward. I am joined today by John Wilcox. John, many of you know him. John is the CTO of InfoSol, and he's also the creator and main architect and developer of InfoBurst. So we all have John to thank for what we're doing today with this product. Today, we're going to be addressing all the questions at the end. John has volunteered to be my moderator, so he'll be looking to see if there are questions that are kind of time specific. So if there are things that we can address while I'm going through the demo, we'll address them. But otherwise, we're going to kind of hold them all to the end, and we will make sure we get all your questions answered. So please don't be shy. Put your questions in the chat. I think, John Shields, there's a hand raise function, but we'll see your questions if you put them in the chat. Shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so let's get started then. Just an introduction for those that don't know me. My name is Bryan Baca. I've been with InfoSol now for about over 15 years. I'm InfoSol's product support manager. So I mainly oversee the support organization at InfoSol, and I basically all things InfoBurst. I work with product trials, implementation, obviously support. I deliver all manner of consulting and services around InfoBurst. So basically, if you use InfoBurst, you know me, you know my colleague Jeremy, you know John. And then there's my email address at the bottom. Most of you know how to get in touch with us through the help desk, but if you have any questions, you want to reach out, please feel free to contact me at my email address there, bbaca@infosol.com. Okay, so let's move right into the topic for today, which is InfoBurst 2022.1. So this version of InfoBurst was released just over a month ago on January 6th. And a lot of what I'm going to cover today is available in the version release notes that are available. They're publicly available on our help desk. The address there, help.infosol.com/support/discussions. Most of you know where our forums are. For those that don't, that's the location. And if you'd like to scan in the QR code, that'll take you directly to that particular link in the forums. I'll give you just a moment if you want to scan that. And while you're looking at that cute QR code, my 13-year-old saw me preparing this presentation, and she asked me, you know what a QR code is, as if to suggest I'm a little too old to be working with QR codes. So that was fun. Okay, so let's get on with it. So really in these webinars, we're going to be looking at the main features available in a particular version. I'm not going to cover it all. Some versions will have lots of features. It's minor things, tweaks to existing functionality. So I'm going to try to, or we will try to hit all the major features, and then obviously the release notes are going to give you everything you need to know about a particular version. All right, let's just start with the basics in terms of environment support, reporting platforms, business objects. Obviously, BI 4.3 SPO2 was recently released, and 2022.1 officially supports that latest service pack of BI 4.3. And then on the business object side, we recently, or in this version, we've added support for printer or printing of Crystal reports. This already existed for Webby, and we had a few Crystal customers that have recently started looking at printing, so we added that destination for Crystal reports as well. Okay, moving on to Tableau for those Tableau users among us. 2022.1 is the official version for the latest 2021.4 release of Tableau, which came out in, I think, early December, largely to address some of those exploit issues. So I know many of you are already on 2021.4 and using InfoBurst successfully. Okay, let's get into the features then. So the first one regards delivery notifications. So as many of you know, as part of a non-email delivery, so a delivery to, let's say, SharePoint or a network folder, or maybe you're delivering content back into business objects, other destinations, you have the option in such a delivery to send an email notification when the delivery completes. So the idea is, let's say I push some content up to SharePoint, and I'd like to also let a group of users know that that content is now ready. That's the purpose of that notification. And traditionally, that has been a feature available for email recipients. The notification goes to email recipients. In 2021, we introduced the ability to leverage webhooks. So this is the ability for an application like InfoBurst to talk to and send messages to collaboration solutions like Microsoft Teams and Slack. The delivery notification feature has now been extended to support Slack and Microsoft Teams. So I can deliver a piece of content to a destination, and then I can automatically send to a Slack channel or a Teams channel a note, a message saying, hey, this content's been delivered, and then potentially a link to that content. We're not going to talk about the other aspects of this new webhook feature in this webinar. At the end of this webinar, I'll be talking to you about our next webinar where we look back on 2021, and we'll spend some more time talking about how we do this Slack and Microsoft Teams integration and what that can mean for you, because there are some interesting things you can do. So let me show you a demonstration of this. Let's go back into InfoBurst. All right. So here in the InfoBurst UI, I'll just quickly show it to you. We're not going to spend too much time setting things up in this webinar, but here in System, and this is obviously for administrators, under Configuration, for those of you using the 64-bit versions of InfoBurst, you'll see this webhooks configuration category. And within it, I have pre-configured a Microsoft Teams channel that I can then send stuff to from InfoBurst. So that's what we're looking at here. So once my environment's set up to do this, I can then, I'll just show you, let's go in here to my burst folder. And I'm going to create a new burst. Let's just call this webhook notification burst. We won't do anything fancy here. I'm just going to add an item to the burst. Let's just use a query, right? We'll just deliver a query as Excel, nothing fancy. So here's a database connection and a query. I'm going to add that. And then let's just say our requirement is to send that in our delivery to SharePoint. And I'll just select the document library. I'll just put this into my documents folder. And that down here under the notification section is where I will configure the, in this case, Teams notification. So I'm going to add a recipient. And from my recipient drop-down list, you'll now see two new entries. One is MS Teams, one is Slack. I have my MS Teams channel configured, and that automatically populates here. So all I'm doing is saying, what channel in Teams do we want to send the message to? I save that, and then we can go ahead and put in an optional message. I'll do that here. Let's just say new report content. Actually, let's do this in the macro builder. That's where I should be doing this. So here in the macro builder, I'll just create this static message, new report content available for, and let's say I want to use a date stamp. So I'll just put in the today macro. That'll always resolve the current date. And I'll apply that. So that's the message that we're going to send when this content is delivered to SharePoint. I'm going to save that, and we'll actually run it and see it working. This will take just a moment. As I said, we're not going to get into the configuration of webhooks today. There is documentation on the InfoSol help desk that walks the administrator through the process of getting the appropriate access in Teams or Slack that they can then use to configure InfoBurst. So that's done, and you can see here the steps: send content link to MS Teams. That's done. So I've actually got Teams open here, and here you can see the resulting message. So here's the message that I entered in that notification, the date stamp, and then here even is a link to that Excel file that I delivered up to SharePoint, so the user could click on it, pop open SharePoint, and there's the file that InfoBurst delivered. So that's the new delivery notification feature using webhooks, MS Teams, and Slack. All right. Back to our slides. Okay, the next big feature of 2022.1 is support for a product called Squirrel 365. I know looking at the list, there are several users that already leverage Squirrel. For those that don't, I thought it'd be good to at least introduce what Squirrel is to you. Squirrel is what's referred to as a no-code dashboard and web application designer. It's a dashboarding tool, and it's actually a dashboarding tool that was inspired by, and I'd say replaces, good old Excelsius, right? So we have users that are creating dashboards and web applications that are actually leveraging InfoBurst, right? So in a dashboard, I'm visualizing data, and a lot of our users will leverage the InfoBurst data cache, or what's known as the XDC, as the source of the data for their Squirrel dashboards, right? But we can use database queries, business objects, that sort of thing. So for those of you who use Squirrel dashboards, Squirrel 365, 2022.1 introduces support for Squirrel. Specifically, in this version, you have the ability to host your Squirrel dashboard in the InfoBurst portal. Regardless of your license type, you all have the InfoBurst portal. It's a destination you can use to deliver content where users can be granted access to the portal, and they can come in and they can view their content. The content can be versioned. It's just part of the product that you have today. So we've just added the ability to upload and host a dashboard to the portal, which I'll show you in a moment. I'd say probably for me, the most interesting piece of this new functionality is the ability to take that Squirrel dashboard that is connected to InfoBurst, right? It's getting its data from the InfoBurst data cache. It's using what's called cache queries to select data out of that cache using standard SQL. All that complexity can be rendered offline. So InfoBurst has the ability to take that Squirrel dashboard, bundle up the data, and then ship it off to the end user as a file, right? Send it to them in email or send it to SharePoint, where they can actually install a little viewer utility that we're shipping with 2022.1 that allows them to take these dashboards and view them completely offline. So it's really handy for those situations where you've got dashboard consumers that maybe can't make the connection into your network to get to InfoBurst. Maybe you've got firewall restrictions, or maybe you have users that just aren't internet connected when they want to interact with their Squirrel dashboards. This hopefully will provide a solution for those users. Standalone offline dashboards that use all the complexity of XDC and cache queries. And then finally, the ability to take those InfoBurst portal hosted dashboards and embed them in a PowerPoint slide. So let me show you all three of those. Okay, let's move over here. Sorry, let's go here. So this is the Squirrel Designer. This is not going to be a presentation on Squirrel. I just wanted to show you what it looked like. And actually, for those of you that used Excelsius, this might look fairly familiar, right? It's a dashboard design tool that uses a spreadsheet model. And so in this tool, I have created a simple dashboard, right? This dashboard is getting data from InfoBurst by way of the XDC, the cache, and it's also leveraging cache queries, right? So pass a value to the cache, get back Washington, that sort of thing. Okay, so now that I have, what I've done ahead of time is I have published this dashboard as a file. It's actually called a .dash file. And so what I'd like to do now is host this dashboard in InfoBurst. So let me switch back over to the InfoBurst UI. And I'll switch over to the portal. Now, just as a reminder, here I am logged into the main InfoBurst user interface, and I have access to the portal. But you can present the portal to users as a separate URL that is just the portal. So if you're thinking about using the portal, it's not just the main UI. We have a separate UI just for the portal that you can give to your users. So I'm going to go into my dashboards folder here, and I actually forgot to delete this. So I'm going to go in and delete this real quick so I can show you what this looks like. Let's do that. Okay. So now I'm in my dashboards folder, and this is where I'd like to host my Squirrel dashboard. We have a new actions menu in the portal. If any of you use the portal, this will look new. And there is an option on this menu to upload a dash file. So I'll select that. I'll go out and browse for the dash file that I published from Squirrel. I have it right here on my desktop. And I'll upload that. Goes very quickly. And now I have a Squirrel dashboard that is viewable and can be interacted with from the InfoBurst portal. There are other methods of hosting Squirrel. We won't get into those now, but if you're an InfoBurst user and you use the portal, this may be an option for you. Okay, while we're here in the portal, let's then look at using InfoBurst to embed a portal, using InfoBurst to embed a Squirrel dashboard in PowerPoint. So once I've uploaded my dashboard to the portal, under my actions menu, I have this get PowerPoint ID. There's a bit of a setup process to do this. It's a one-time thing. We're not going to get into that here, but there is documentation on the help desk that explains this. Once we have the ID and we have the Microsoft 365 add-in that we're going to use, then you can go about putting Squirrel into your PowerPoint slide. So here I have a blank slide in PowerPoint. On the insert menu, and then under add-ins, I have installed previously what's called our InfoBurst Dash Presenter. When I select this, it's going to present us a dialog that basically explains, hey, you need to put your dashboard in the portal, get the ID. Once we have the ID, and for some reason I lose my mouse. This might be a Zoom thing. There it goes. I'm losing my mouse, so I can't actually see where I'm clicking. Let's do this and that. And I'm not going to be able to resize this because I can't see it. Maybe I can. Anyway, I've lost my mouse. So you can see the point here is we can now take that dashboard, which is actually hosted in the portal, and render it into, if I can click here, there you can see I can interact. So the dashboard is fully interactive within the PowerPoint slide. So this is an option once you host your dashboards in the InfoBurst portal. Okay, let's see then. Okay, so the last piece of this then is delivering Squirrel dashboards offline. I'm not going to go through that process today for time purposes, but in a nutshell, we take our dashboard, we publish it as a dash file, we add it to InfoBurst, we put it in a burst, and then we deliver it. So the result of that is let's go over here. I've got it here in a folder. It's called offline dashboard.dash. It's actually the same dashboard, but when I open it, it's not going to open in a browser. It's actually going to open in what we call our Dash Viewer app. This is something that you can download from the InfoSol help desk. And once I receive these .dash files, it could be delivered to SharePoint for me. I could get it via email. I just double click my dash file and it's going to open up in this offline viewer. So at this point, it's the same dashboard with all that cache data, the complexity of cache queries, but it's available completely offline. So hopefully that will add some value for our Squirrel users. Okay, so that is the Squirrel features in 2022.1. Let's move on to some of the changes at the system level. Let's see, the first major change here is the addition of an events section in Monitor. And it'll make more sense when I show that to you in just a moment. We'll come back to that. The next one, and again, I think this is going to make more sense in a demonstration. We've added a new macro. This is actually a really cool macro. This was inspired by one of our longtime users. Is the ability to run a query in the context of a burst, and then use that resulting value for any macro-aware field. So I could run a query to put a value into a subject line for an email, or I could run a query and use that value to name a file or a folder. So any macro-aware field. And then finally, we've added for SharePoint and Power BI platforms the option to use authentication with a certificate and a private key. So I'm going to show those first two to you in the UI. So let's go over here. And let's come out of the portal. All right, so first we're going to look at the new events section of Monitor. So here I am in Monitor. As most of you know, Monitor is where I can come to, at a high level, monitor the daily activity with InfoBurst. I can see completed and aborted schedules. And then under schedules where I can view that detail. So here's everything that is scheduled for today. So everything that has run, is running, or will run in the current day will be listed on this screen. And as you know, if you use event-based schedules, not time-based, you will see your event-based schedules listed here. Now, the challenge for many of our users has been, many of you don't have a schedule screen that looks like this. You're going to have hundreds or maybe thousands of schedules that run on a daily basis. And so looking at this screen and sifting out just the events can be difficult. So what we decided to do in 2022.1 is add a new section to Monitor that is focused just on events. So actually, let's go back. So here you can see the two event-based schedules here. And when we click on them, we do return some basic information about that event. If we come over here, now we can present to you much more detail. So all you're going to see here is active events. So those events that are being actively checked by InfoBurst. And so here, for example, if I click on this trigger file event, here we can see the status of that event. We can see how often it's being checked. We can see what it's checking, right? So here's the text file that it's looking for. We're currently in a waiting status, so InfoBurst is kind of between checking intervals. We can see the first and last check times. And what seems to be most relevant a lot of the time is when is the next check, right? There it is. So we can see we have another check coming up in about 4 minutes. And then obviously here as well, this is a different type of event. This is a query. So again, this was inspired by our users, and we hope that for those of you that use events, this will give you a better way and a more comprehensive way to monitor your event-based schedules. And then the other bit in system is the new query macro. So as you were watching that, for those of you that use extra columns in InfoBurst, you might have been asking yourselves, I already have that. I can already get data or values from a query and use them to name my files or customize my email subject lines. This is true. And let me explain the distinction. So here in this burst, I have this first item is a Webby document. That document has a parameter, right? So if you use bursts in this way, meaning you're controlling your parameter values, and this could be a parameter or a filter with a data source, where that data source is a database table, an Excel file, any tabular source, then you can control the parameter with that query. But if that query returns other columns of information, you can use those columns to do customizations like file names, like subject lines. So let's just go into that database connection quickly. And I'm going to run that query just so we can get a little baseline. All right. So there's the idea. I have a table. It happens to come from a database. And I'm using this column, California, to drive my state parameter values. And because I'm using what we call a parameter source, all of these other columns are now available to me in the delivery, right? So let's remind ourselves what that looks like. So I'm going to go back to the burst. I'm going to go into the delivery here. And let's just say the requirement is to create a custom file name, right? Let's just say report for region. And then I want to pull the region value from that same query. Well, under this data section, we can see there's the primary column state, and here are all the extra columns, and we denote those with the percent symbol. These are all the other columns I can use. So although we're bursting for state, I can use region in this context, right? To, in this case, name my file. So hence extra columns. However, we have had users say, okay, I want to pull a value from the database to do something like a custom file name, but I'm not bursting, right? I'm just refreshing the report. There is no parameter. Well, in that case, yeah, we can't pull that value because we only pull these values, these extra columns, when we're using the source to drive our parameters, our bursting. So this new macro was created to satisfy that requirement. I want to pull values from a database query when there is no bursting, right? So here, I have a report with no parameters. So this is kind of a simple refresh and deliver. And I'd like to pull, let's say, a region value from a query. With the new macro, we can do that. So let's go back here before we do this. I'm just going to go back into the database connection. And I have another query here that's going to return me a value from that same table. So it does have a parameter. I'm just going to say I want region for state California. I'm going to run that, and you can see here the value as well. So that's what I want as part of my file name, but I don't have a parameter, hence I don't have extra columns. So let's go back over here. And I'm going to go into the delivery for that document, the one without parameters. And again, I want to pull the region value for my file name. If I go into the macro builder, notice here I don't have a data section because there is no data context, there is no parameter. But down here under functions, there's a new macro called @query. So if you come into the macro builder, you select that, it's going to, at the bottom here under description, you're going to get a full definition of what this macro does, runs a query. You have the option if it has a parameter to pass a value, and then it does give you a few usage examples, right? So I'm going to do that here. Let's just select the macro there, and then within parentheses, I'm going to define, we need, in this case, 3 bits of information. We need the database connection ID. And actually, I'm going to show you where that is, just so you know. I'm going to come out of here really quick, go back to the database connection. And you'll notice here, we put it in kind of small letters up on the top right. There's the ID, 26, it's that right there, 26903. So that's the piece of information you need and the query name to use this macro. So just when you're using this, make a note of your database connection ID, which I have done. So let's go back over to the burst, into the delivery, and oh yeah, we were doing this. So we want, okay, there's our query macro. I'm going to put them in my, oops, parentheses. Okay, so I need, and again, this is described down below in the description. I need the ID of the connection, 26903 is the ID, comma, the query name that we want to run, and the query name was region query. And then the query has a parameter, so I will pass a value to that parameter here in the macro. So the query, or the parameter name was state, and the value I want to pass is California. And the query doesn't have to have a parameter. You could just run a query that returns a value. In this case, I want to use a parameter as well. So that's my macro, and I can actually test it from here. So InfoBurst is executing that query in real time, and we can see the result. And then that value is what will be populated as the file name at runtime. And obviously, that value could change because it's in the database, and that data may be changing and evolving. So run query, or the query macro, gives you the ability to execute a query and populate a value for any macro aware field. So the macro aware fields are anything with a little blue M, where you no longer need to have a parameter source or a data source to get at that information. So we do hope some of you will find some uses for that new macro. Okay. And we already did our demonstration. Okay, I wanted to take the opportunity in this webinar, we'll always do this, to give you a little sneak peek, a preview of what's coming up in our next version. We've been pretty good about releasing about 4 versions per year, usually right around the start of the quarter. So we're currently targeting April for the release of InfoBurst 2022.2. And this isn't a list of all the features that are coming, but I wanted to give you just an idea of what you can expect in that new version. So in 2022.2, look forward to Power BI publishing, right? So for those Power BI users, and we already have some that are leveraging InfoBurst to do data management for Power BI, right? So taking business objects data, sending it to Power BI server, you will have the ability to publish Power BI reports, let's say in PDF format, and deliver those to all manner of destinations, SharePoint, email, FTP, wherever you send your content. And you'll even have the ability to do filtering, bursting. So take a report, let's say it's a city report, I want to filter it by state and send each of those resulting city PDFs from that Power BI dashboard out to different destinations. So that's coming in 2022.1. Custom calendars. This is something that several users have been requesting, and we're happy to deliver in 2022.2. So this will be the ability to create a custom calendar. If you're a business objects user, very much the same thing, right? You go in, you create a calendar, you say, here are my custom dates, and this can span years if necessary. And then you can save that custom calendar and use it when you create a schedule. So if I'm a schedule user, I'm going to create my schedule. Instead of defining the dates manually, I can reference that custom calendar to define my schedule. So that's coming in 2022.2, and hopefully that will help some of you in terms of these repetitive schedule requirements. And I would also, and we're going to do a demonstration of it in that webinar, but basically think of it like a delivery template if you're a current template user, right? I'm going to create a calendar. Here's the dates, and let's say that calendar is used by, in 1,000 different schedules, right? If the schedule definition needs to change, then the custom calendar is changed, and it will affect all the schedules. In fact, the user that inspired that is on the call today, so thank you for that idea. This next feature, I could spend a lot of time talking about this. I'm going to try to summarize it. This is very cool, but it's also a bit advanced. Let me give you a scenario. So I have a burst. Doesn't really matter what we're bursting. Let's say we're bursting a Webby report, right? And I'm going to burst it for 100 cities, right? So we're out there, and business objects is refreshing and exporting, 100 times. And for some reason, let's say we get 50 values in, and there's a problem in business objects, and failures start to occur. This is a real world issue. This is things that people see in the real world. So the concept here is, if we turn on this feature, InfoBurst is going to keep track of what has been successfully produced and what didn't. So let's say we get 50 values through that list, and then the failures start to occur, right? And so InfoBurst has already retrieved from business objects 50 files. Let's say they're city PDF files. We've got them. And we also know, because we're tracking this information, that the other 50 failed. With this feature turned on, you can either tell the burst, okay, in the event of a failure with this feature turned on, I want you to retry maybe a couple of times, right? So maybe it's an intermittent issue in business objects that is going to, that you know is going to get resolved. InfoBurst will then rerun the burst, but only for the values that failed the first time, right? So we're not going to rerun all 100. We've already got the first 50. We're going to rerun for the second 50. And there's I think you can select the number of retries there just in case, you need a few times to get through it. And then there'll be another option for this feature that says, okay, don't rerun. In the event of a failure, track what worked and what didn't, and then you can come back into that burst later, review what happened, and then optionally rerun it for just those failed values. So there's either a retry mode or kind of more of a manual mode. And this is something, unfortunately, we all face it, environmental issues, databases, business objects, Tableau server, whatever, they can have their issues. And this feature is designed to hopefully make recovery a little easier and more optimal. Instead of rerunning for everything, let's just rerun for what didn't work the first time. I wasn't going to describe all that here, but it's a very exciting feature. Lots of users recently requesting support for SharePoint lists. So in 2022.2, you'll have the ability to do a few things with SharePoint lists. You'll be able to use a SharePoint list as a data source. So that means I have a SharePoint list and it contains my parameter values for my burst, or maybe it contains my email addresses for a delivery. So you'll be able to use it as a data source, but you'll also be able to publish and deliver your SharePoint list. So maybe you have a SharePoint list that you would like to publish in, let's say, HTML format or Excel format, and then deliver that to users. You'll be able to do that as well. And then finally, for those of you that use, and we have a lot of users doing this now, that are putting database queries in their burst. So that's basically the ability to run a query and then publish the results in HTML, among other formats, and then deliver that raw data out to users. You have had the ability to, when we publish the HTML, there's a stock CSS that we use, and you have the ability to go in and customize that CSS for your own internal look and feel. But it's universal, right? So any burst that does this is always going to use that one master CSS file. And we've had requests to be able to have multiple CSS files and then use those for different deliveries, right? Different styles. So in 2022.2, you'll be able to reference or create multiple CSS files and then reference those in your deliveries. And that will actually apply to both HTML output from database queries and the new SharePoint list, which you'll be able to publish as HTML. All right. This is a reminder. I know there are a fair number of you on the webinar today that are on Build 240. Build 240 was the last 32-bit version of InfoBurst that came out just over actually a year and some months ago, right? Starting January of last year, we transitioned to 64-bit, and I'll talk in a moment about how we're going to cover that in our next webinar. But if you're looking at this version of InfoBurst, which is 64-bit, and you are on Build 240, then please make sure you review the 64-bit migration document in the InfoSol help desk. So there's the address, and you just search that name, 64-bit migration. There's a QR code that will take you directly to that article if you're interested. So please, if you're a Build 240 user, this is a moving from 240 to a 64-bit version. Basically, any version released after January 2021, you do have to go through what's technically a migration, but it's a very painless process. It's actually very easy if you just do the right steps in terms of backing up. But just review the document, make sure you understand how to move from 32-bit InfoBurst Build 240 to a 64-bit version. Okay, so the recording for today's webinar, for those that maybe came in late, or you want to share this with other coworkers or InfoBurst users, should be available this time tomorrow at events.infosol.com. Okay, so let's look forward then to the next webinar. This one's set. We have a date. It's March 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And this is going to be a year in review. So we've been a little bit quiet over the last year in terms of advertising our 64-bit versions. We had just put our user base through an upgrade, right? Because if you were on an older version of 32-bit, you were on the old Flash UI. And so all of our users had to go through a transition to get on a version of InfoBurst by the end of, I'm forgetting now. But basically, everyone was having to update to get onto the new UI. And then a month later, we introduced 64-bit. So we've been a little bit quiet about it. But we released 4 versions of 64-bit in 2021. And there are lots of new features in 64-bit, things that we couldn't do in 32-bit that we're really excited to show you. So in that webinar on March 10th, we're going to walk you through most of the main features of 2021. So that's going to be a very demo heavy kind of a knowledge transfer sort of webinar. So you can register there, events.infosol.com for that webinar. And here's just a kind of a preview of the features that we're going to be looking at, because I think a lot of you will find this useful. We're going to be talking about the transition to 64-bit. This will be especially interesting to those of you that are still build 240 users. So what does that architecture change mean for InfoBurst? Workflows. More and more of our users that are on 64-bit are adopting workflows. Workflows, for those of you that aren't familiar, are basically a simplified way to create a burst and a schedule designed for business users, right? So it kind of wraps up the process of adding a document, creating a burst, and creating a schedule all into one little wizard interface. It's not as complex as the burst and the schedule. Some of the features that you're used to, like actions and events, are only available building the traditional burst and schedule. But there are more and more of our customers who want to expose InfoBurst to business users where they're doing specific tasks, right? I want to take a Webby report, send it to email as a PDF. There's a workflow for that. I want to take a Webby report and publish it to Power BI server as a data set. There's a workflow for that. So I'll go into more depth about what workflows are, how you can set up to use them, and how you might benefit from that. Promotions. In 64-bit InfoBurst, I want to say in middle of last year, we introduced promotions, which is the ability to basically promote or copy an item from one environment to another, like test to production. So for example, I have a burst that I've created and developed and tested in my non-production environment. I want to promote it to my production environment. Promotions is a feature that will allow you to do that. Webhooks, we talked about that in today's presentation. I'll be showing you a little more in depth how that works, and I'll also be talking about how we can use webhooks for status notification. So if something fails, like a burst or a schedule, I want InfoBurst to automatically send an alert to a Teams channel or a Slack channel. We can do that with webhooks. Power BI, I talked a little bit about the Power BI publishing features that are coming up in InfoBurst version 2022.2, but earlier or late in 2021, we introduced the ability to schedule a Webby report, a business objects universe query, a database query, and other sources. We can schedule the refresh and then publish that as a Power BI data set and send it to Power BI service. So essentially using InfoBurst as the data management piece for Power BI. We'll look at that in more detail. Test email. This was a feature that was added to the system that essentially allows you, because one of the things that's really hard to test in the real world is email, right? If I have a burst that delivers 1,000 pieces of personalized content to 1,000 email recipients, I can test everything about that burst except actually delivering the emails. I don't want to send 1,000 emails as part of a test. This test email feature will allow you to InfoBurst will actually create the content, the personalized content, create the email message, attach the message, but then instead of sending it, it stores it, and then you can go in and actually look at the emails that those users will receive. You can see the email messages, you can see the attached content. So give yourself that satisfaction that the burst did what it was supposed to do without actually sending those messages to end users. That's test email. Then for schedules, this is something that many users have been asking for a new status for schedules. For schedules that are set to expire, there is now an on expiry status, which gives you the ability then to leverage InfoBurst actions based on a schedule expiring. So an action could be sending an email notification or kicking off a query or other types of things you can do. Okay, so lots of longtime users, lots of new users on the webinar today. Please, if you haven't already, go to the help desk, help.infosol.com, go into forums, and there's a specific announcements forum. We reserve that announcements forum just to let you know when important stuff happens. So mainly version releases, right? New version comes out, you're going to get an automatic email sent to you letting you know, hey, new version's available. Every once in a while, we'll use it for some other purpose, but mostly it's about letting you know there's a new version of the software available. So I do encourage all my users to opt in for that so that you know when new versions are available and you can get on those and start testing them and learn about the new features. We have a Twitter channel for those of you that use Twitter at work, at InfoBurst, and we push out a lot of different information to the Twitter channel, announcements like the webinars, tutorial videos, all sorts of stuff we put out on the InfoBurst channel that we think you'd find useful. Okay, and with that, let's take a quick look at our Q&A. Okay, I'm going to look at the Q&A first, and then we'll take a look at some of the comments. Let's see. Nick asked, is there a plan to add a local backup for individual bursts, something like an export-import instead of restoring the full server repo? No, that's not something I've actually seen requested before. But I think that's an interesting idea. So we get obviously lots of ideas sent to us that InfoBurst is largely based on the ideas and requirements of our users over the last, I don't know, 17, 18 years. And so we're always eager to look at these new ideas and see if they're a good fit for InfoBurst. So let me just, let's not just come out of here. Please, I would encourage all of you, not just Nick, to go to our forums. I'll get to the other questions in a moment. So here in the InfoSol help desk under forums, forums is the user influence forum. This is the clearinghouse for all user ideas for InfoBurst. So Nick and anyone else who has an idea for an InfoBurst feature, we encourage you to come to this forum, lay out your idea, and be detailed, be technically specific, right? The more information you can provide us helps us to evaluate the idea and see if it's a good fit for InfoBurst. And here you can also see all the ideas that have been implemented. You might actually find your idea in this forum. As you can see, there's dozens of pages of these things. And then you can come in and actually see, what features have been planned, what's been implemented, that sort of thing. So the answer, Nick, is no, but we're interested. So make sure you get that into the user influence forum. Nick also asks, could you promote from prod to dev? Yes, it's not direction specific. For those of you that are thinking about promotions, there is a promotions article in the help desk. Please, please, please review that before you start trying promotions, because InfoBurst is a complex system, right? A burst isn't just a thing. A burst could be 10 documents and 5 data sources and 4 actions and on and on. So a burst or anything you want to promote is a collection of objects, and you just need to understand what you're promoting and the implications of doing so, right? So let's see, I don't actually need to show you this stuff, but if we come into system management, I'm sorry, here under system, there is an entire article devoted to promotion. So before you use this feature, well, obviously you'll need to read this document to be able to set it up, but please review this, understand the implications of using this. There are restrictions And this article lays out all the rules based on the object type of what you can and can't do with promotions. So please, if you have any questions about this feature or anything else that we've talked about today, come to us in the help desk. We're happy to get those questions answered for you. And then let's see, Nick, the email feature sounds like content review that we are currently using. That's correct, Nick. And test email, let's go back to the slide. And yeah, let's see, that's, again, that was from the year in review slide, right? Our next webinar. Oops, there it is. Test email, you have that. That's actually been around since I'm not quite sure when that was introduced in 32-bit, but with content review, yes, InfoBurst will create and store that email content, but then there's that's designed for either saying, I've reviewed the content and it's good, send it, or there's a problem, deny it. So it's more for reviewing the delivery, either go or no go. This takes that review process out of it. It's just create it and store it. Someone can go in and look at it for test purposes, and then it automatically cleans it. You can delete it manually or it cleans itself up. So it is part of, Nick, it's part of review, but it's just for generating emails without the validation part of it, right? And those are the only 3 Q&As we had. I'm just looking through the chat to see if there's anything else. Let's see, Sajid asks, how can we get a trial copy of Squirrel? And it looks like John Shields gave him that information. Let's see, got a little bit of time here. Okay, it looks like that's pretty much everything. So this isn't the last time we're going to do this. We're going to be doing this quite regularly. If you have ideas about what you'd like to see in these webinars, it's not there yet. I'm going to go set that up today. There's going to be a webinars forum on the help desk. Please come there, share your feedback about the webinars, your ideas for future webinars. Sky's the limit, right? This is our community. We all work with InfoBurst, and there will probably be webinars where we're telling your stories. We've done that in the past. It's always great to have users come in and talk about the solutions they've developed with InfoBurst. It gives ideas to other users. It might inspire future usage. Before we go, John, did you have any comments? Anything you want to talk about? John Wilcox?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. No, I mean, only just to sort of say that thanks everyone for joining this webinar, and I think you'll agree if you have been, or if you are still on the 240 build, which we know a number of you are, there's been a lot you've missed, and I think that's the great thing about this session is hopefully you're now aware that there is a 64-bit build. It's actually been out for over a year, and we've actually released 5 builds of it. So, this one is focused on the latest, but I think the next one will be very interesting for a lot of you who haven't seen anything of 64-bit. So, yeah, we have been very busy, and it's really, really great to be able to share this with you finally. So that's all I would add, Brian, is just to say that, yeah, there's been a lot. There's been a lot of releases and a lot of new functionality, and it's it's really exciting to be the other side of the whole Flash debacle, right? Which all came to a head and sort of forced everyone to scramble, and so we were heads down redoing the UI for quite some time. We always wanted to go 64-bit, but we had to prioritize on the UI. Yeah, so yeah, very busy, lots of exciting stuff. And I know, obviously, I don't know, a bunch of you are on 64-bit already. So a lot of this stuff you already know, but 2022.1 is an exciting release in its own right. And I think, again, some of you probably didn't know about Squirrel, so you may have learned a bit there. And some of the features we've just added, I think, make it really exciting. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say, Brian.
Okay, John, thank you. And then just to wrap this up, in the next webinar, we're going to be talking just a bit more about the annual InfoBurst Experience at the InfoSol InfoBurst conference. For those of you that have attended in the past, this is 3 days of everything InfoBurst. We typically visit a resort in California. Last year we had both in-person and virtual attendance. where we spend 3 days. Our team presents sessions, roadmap sessions. We go into detail on specific features and use cases for InfoBurst. We have lots of our users that will come in and present their InfoBurst use cases to conference attendees. So this is the InfoBurst conference. And in the next webinar, I'm going to be sharing those details with you. This typically occurs, I want to say, second to last week or last week in June of every year. And I think we've done it for like 10 years now. So really great opportunity to interact with InfoBurst users in a conference setting. And then we have our always popular InfoBurst Influence session where attendees can come in and talk about the roadmap and actually offer their ideas for the direction of InfoBurst. So with that, thank you all for attending today. It's good to see all of you. I hope we can keep this going. Recording will be available to you tomorrow. And everyone have a nice day and goodbye.